Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead of them and their companies. I'm your host, Olivia Sammons, and in each episode, we'll uncover the stories behind successful startups, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we're super excited to be joined by Lynn Juang, the founder of Frameworks Consulting, a boutique consultancy helping creative leaders and businesses bring clarity to complexity. With over 15 years of experience as a creative executive, including serving as a COO at Brand Jewelry NYC, Lynn has partnered with organizations to distill big ideas into actionable strategies through her three-step program: Distill, Define, Decide. By combining brands, operations, and culture, she helps leaders turn creative chaos into structured growth. Lynn, very warm welcome to Founders Future. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Awesome, let's get to it. So I like to start with all my guests at the beginning of their journey. So can you take us back to before you started the company and what you were doing at the time and what motivated you to start up the company from there?
Sure. It's an easy one. Before I started the company, I was doing nothing at all. I had
Yeah.
taken a bit of a sabbatical after my last full-time role, which, as you mentioned, I was a COO of Brand Bureau, a multidisciplinary branding and strategy firm. And I had taken some time off and really was very intentional about doing nothing. Sat in the stillness for about 6 months, which I highly recommend if you're able to do so, to just really sit with the stillness and kind of figure out what your priorities are, what matters, how you want to design your life going forward, which is what I did. When I left, I didn't have any grand aspirations to start my own business per se, but after a couple of freelance projects rolled into larger things, I was like, oh, maybe I'll give the solopreneur thing a go. And so I'm still on that experimental journey, figuring things out
Nice.
day by day. But yeah, over time, I thought that there could really be a niche for what I do, coming on the heels of what I'd been doing for 15, 20 years already. And so I decided to give it a go and see where the consulting journey might take me.
Awesome. And I'm assuming not regretting it so far because I'm
Not yet.
good.
Tomorrow is another day.
That jump from sometimes, even as a COO, that jump to being an entrepreneur can be quite a drastic one. How did you find adapting to that and taking on the role?
I think I've been very lucky that throughout really all of my career, I've worked really closely with founders. I've worked at like small boutique shops. So I've always been the right hand and number two to the founder or group of founders. So I think I've had a very firsthand look at what that mindset is. It's a very different set of challenges than just being in senior leadership at XYZ companies. It's a lot more, it's obviously much more personal, especially in the creative world. It's really hard to separate your personal from your professional. It's all wrapped into one. So I think that I went into, and because I work with founders, I have a really intimate, I think, understanding of the very specific kinds of challenges that they face, the considerations that they have, the pressures that they're under, and the kinds of decisions that they have to make. Turning on that lens on myself, I feel like I was a little bit slightly better prepared. As they say, it's always the cobbler's family has no shoes. So it's a lot of do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
It is, and it's a lot of wear many hats and continue going on. But it's nice that you had, as you say, like a pre-look into what it was, and you wasn't just coming completely blind with no judgment or expectation moving forward, which
Yeah,
a little bit more heartfelt.
exactly. And I think I've been working a long time. So I think
Love it.
I really wanted to be, at the risk of using all of the buzzwords, but to really be quite intentional with
Yeah.
how I wanted to build this business. And I think that's a lot
Okay.
of what I try to encourage my clients to think about is not just what kind of business are you looking to create, but what kind of company are you looking to build? And
Love
I,
it.
for one, am not at a point where I want the weight of having a team or a staff, because I think looking at growth in a very sort of measured and deliberate way is how I want to proceed and how I would want to encourage others to think about their founder journeys as well.
Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to getting deeper into the conversation then so we can bring some stuff up. So let's dive into what the business is today to give the listener some more context. Who would you say is your ideal customer? And then from there, maybe we can get more of a dive into the exact offer and services that you provide as well.
Sure. So my target audience is really founder-led creative agencies, design firms. They tend to be on the smaller size, although size
Okay.
isn't necessarily a strict metric per se, but they're usually independent, founder-led. Think the creative director or the architect who spun off and wanted to launch their own practice. So my direct clients are really, they're the experts in their field. They've mastered their craft. They're the best at what they do. And they wanted to build their own business and build their own company, but expert at a craft or subject matter expertise isn't always the same thing as expertise or experience in management, business operations, just the overall kind of infrastructure that is needed to make a business stand up. I love working with those experts. You do what you do. You're great at what you do. Keep
Yeah.
doing it. Let me help you create the sort of foundation or the scaffolding to let you do more of that in a healthy way.
Yeah, as it let them shine and you just build the concrete around them to help them grow. Love it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then how do you go about acquiring your customers at the moment? Are there any kind of specific channels or methods that you found more effective?
That's a great question. Ask me again in 6 months.
Okay.
For right now, I'm still relatively early in my own
Sure.
business. The first couple of years was very much word of mouth, which it still is.
Nice.
But within the last, say, 6 months or so, I've also been pivoting and shifting my focus and positioning. So I'm in that in-between mode where I have a round of outreach and a more concerted effort at outreach ahead of me. So I'm in a in between lull right now. I think a big part something that I've really learned over the last few months is really focusing on nailing the positioning, nailing the audience, getting hyper specific and hyper clear on who it is that I'm serving, which it hasn't changed per se, but I think it's been a lot of work to sharpen who they
Yeah.
are, what the problems that I can support with, how I want to work and how I want to support them. But in terms of pipeline and lead gen, and obviously word of mouth and referrals, and I think LinkedIn for me will probably be one of the more effective channels just because it's where a lot of leaders are in terms of platforms. And then I also have made an effort to really be a part of various communities and organizations
Nice.
this year that, again, it's the modern version of networking, which is just being in the right groups and in the right communities with people who are either like-minded or adjacent so that we can all help refer each other and grow and support each other in the world.
Yeah, 100%. I love the community aspect that is involved with coaches, consultants. It's such a nice, as you say, kind of place to just make sure that you're getting across to the right people. But then there's also other people in there that can help support you should you need to in your journey as well. It's a very nice like, give and take if you can get into the right places. And for like organic growth, as you mentioned, great aid on top of that as well. So in terms of marketing, and the sales process, do you do that as well yourself, or do you have any input or help from anybody else on the back end?
No, everything right now is on my own. As I said, I'm in a bit of an
Yeah,
in-between pre-relaunch phase, but everything I've done on my own. I've been very lucky to have worked alongside a lot of really amazing designers in my day. So I feel like I'd like to think I've picked up a lot of things by osmosis. So right now, all my content and all my materials are of my own making, for better or worse.
amazing. It's pretty cool. And then, so let's talk about the future. I know you're in a bit of a pivot, so maybe we should pivot ourselves. What do the next 12 months look like? What is the next goal or kind of target that you're looking to achieve?
I think for the next 12 months, I have a pretty clear sense of what the shape of what I want my work to be. I'm really excited to begin to reach out to the kinds of creative leaders and agencies that have been on my radar. So really building up the consulting side of the business, which I envision being about, say, two-thirds of the business. And then the other, call it third-ish. I also love partnering and collaborating more directly on the work. So sprinkling
Yeah.
some of that consulting work with a bit more individual contributor work. I think that's also what's really exciting about this time in the industry where There's so many fractional independent consultants where we can all like band together for the right kinds of projects, working a bit more on the inner workings of brand strategy or brand positioning for other companies with other partners is exciting to me too. That's part of why I wanted to open up the lens of an aperture of what I do so I can get my hands on some of the meatier stuff
Nice.
in conjunction with the sort of more behind the scenes consulting.
Amazing. So looking to extend the avenues on both sides. And then what would you say is the biggest challenge in making all that happen at the moment?
I think I've been thinking a lot about this. I think one of the challenges is that business consulting, strategic consulting, this idea of the kind of consulting advisory that I do, I think is relatively new and a little bit foreign to
Okay.
the segment of agencies that I work with. And what I mean by that is this idea of consulting in air quotes, I think is probably was more reserved for the Ogilvies and the Saatchis of the world to tap the McKinseys and the BCGs of the world. Like it feels like it's really big, like expensive, lofty service that the average boutique shop probably couldn't afford. But there, and maybe that was the case back in the day. But I think now that everything is much more splintered and a bit more fragmented, everyone needs help. Like agencies up and down the size and revenue bracket ladder need support. And I think my other observation is that 10, 15 years ago, there just weren't as many
Yeah.
design agencies out there, right? So back in the day, you could get by if the work was good enough, you could get by with a relatively healthy pipeline. And now, certainly post-pandemic, there's just so many more considerations outside of the work itself that just make it a lot harder. And I think for agency founders and leaders, they need a lot more support than they've had to in the past. And so the idea that there's actually someone who can provide that support is a new thing to look for. For myself, I think there might be a bit of a learning curve for my target clients. Like there are those of us slash me out there who can advise on the business, and those kinds of services aren't reserved for huge shops with huge budgets and things like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, especially with COVID was a good point out, but I just feel because generally the move online, even a lot of businesses like that were physical shops or like an actual tender moved online as well. And I think from there, as you're saying, exactly the scaling of the business changes. So then you need different ideas and different people coming in, which maybe they necessarily wouldn't consider before, which is where someone like yourself would be coming, stepping in, which, as you say, wasn't necessarily as available before because maybe the help was slightly different than was needed from that. Is that fair in me saying?
Yeah, I think so. They wasn't as available. I also think that pre-pandemic, those any fragility on the operational side,
Yeah.
you could I don't want to say brush aside, but you could get by. I mean, as we've all been there, like all the internal stuff always gets backburnered. And I think it wasn't until something as major as the pandemic that kind of upended everything and
Yeah.
revealed just how many cracks there were in terms of operational infrastructure, the things that took care of your people, whether it was technology, whether it was systems, whether it
Yeah.
was your retention strategy, whatever it is. So I don't think the need was also as front and center for leaders the way that they are now. Again, 10 years
100%.
ago, it's hey, as long as the work was good, as long as I got the best talent and the best designers and makers, you could probably cobble together a pretty healthy business.
Yeah.
But there's so many more things taking up leaders' brain space, and I think also clients' brain space in terms
With
of their
both.
decision making. Yeah,
100%. In terms of the client, I think like it's very much overwhelmed at the moment. A lot of options, a lot of people shouting things, and maybe not as clear as what they should be on both sides.
exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, amazing. So just before we finish up, I want to switch to a little bit of a lightning round with you.
Sure.
So to kick it off, if you was to go back, maybe let's go back a couple of years to pre-pandemic or maybe when you took your 6 months off and you could leave yourself with a little bit of advice moving forward, what would
Hmm.
that be?
It would be to take all the advice with a grain of salt. I've gone down many rabbit holes and research and inspiration from various, as I was launching and defining, redefining my consulting services. I think knowing that take what works and leave the rest. I think there's often a flattening of advice.
Yeah,
And I think we need to know to read between the lines and find the nuances of that and what's useful for you specifically. So I'll give you a specific example. Common conventional advice is niche down, pick a lane, et
Yep.
cetera, et cetera. And that's all fine and good, but I think we as founders ourselves, I think we need to double click into that and really do the examination of, but what does that mean for me? Don't take that advice at face value, because that's kind
Mhm.
of what I did the first couple of years. And I kept like, there was so much internal friction because I was like, I can't niche down. I can't, it felt limiting. So I think it just takes a bit of like developing that muscle to take that advice, but then go through the exercise of interpreting what makes sense for you and your business versus someone else's. Because there's a lot of nuances that get lost in these like sound bites and headlines and clickbaity posts. So I think finding what works for you and not losing sight of that is really important.
Yeah, very powerful words there. Especially finding what you're doing and making sure like your head and your voice is the one being heard within you. I think is quite hard for entrepreneurs. You get like the word, what's the word? Imposter syndrome gets thrown around a lot and just things that maybe you need to back yourself and, as you say, listen to the right words and follow them. Um,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think just to, I'll close the loop on that. I think that also the sort of double-edged sword of so much information being
yeah.
available. I think it's really wonderful that there's so much advice and so much
Yeah.
great content out there. But on the flip side, it takes a lot of energy to sift through that, synthesize, and then also understand what works for you and what doesn't. So there's a sometimes too much of a good thing is
Yeah.
not great.
Not always a good thing. Yeah. We're going back to the we're now the consumers part in the of the conversation we were talking about earlier where we're having a lot of information chucked at us and it's like what, as you say, what one's cutting through with that double-edged sword and knowing which one to believe and which one not to. Sometimes just yourself is all you need to believe. So what is the best piece of advice that you've or best piece of leadership or growth advice that you've received throughout your career?
That I've received. The best piece of advice I ever received indirectly was from my first creative director that I ever worked for, and it was never assume. And just those simple two words I've carried with me for a really long time. Always ask why and never, which is the underlying advice with that, is to never assume. I think that's again on the heels of what we're saying of just like information overload and everything is tends to be so superficial and surface these days. Never assume that what an RFP says is what they mean, that what the client feedback might say over email is what they mean. I think so. I think always, I think investigating a little bit further and not taking things at face value
Yeah.
is incredibly useful.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And then as a final note, to our founders who are listening and maybe just at the start of their own journey, what piece of advice would you leave with them to help them move forward?
Yeah, I think though if I could tell current future founders one thing is don't just think about what your product or your service is. Don't forget to think about what kind of company do you want to build.
Nice.
I think those are two very different things. A successful business is not the same thing as a successful or healthy company. And if you're launching a business with a capital B, chances are there will be a team, whether it's a team of 5 or a team of 500, working alongside you. And I think thinking about the container of that company is not something that a lot of founders give a give enough thought to. And I get it, early days, you're just trying to get things off the ground and grow so that you can do more thoughtful things later. But I think oftentimes the kind of company you want to have gets lost in the shuffle
Yeah.
because I think that has a direct impact on or implication on what kind of leader you want to be, which implicates what kind of senior leaders you want to bring on board to help you steer the ship. It informs how you hire and informs everything. And I think when there's so much focus on the output, the actual shape and energy of the company sometimes gets lost. So I would encourage people to think about that part as well.
Love it. And with that is a wrap on another inspiring episode of Founders Future. Lynn, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your incredible journey and insight with us. Where can people reach out to work with you if they would like to?
So the best place to reach me is through my website, which is frameworks-consulting.com, and drop me a note there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, it was really great to chat with you, Olivia. I'm so glad we were able to make this happen.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please go and connect with Lynn. And also, don't forget to go and subscribe to Founders Future via wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you are a business owner, specifically a coach, consultant, or agency owner, and you're really looking to scale your business and you want to enhance your sales and marketing efforts, visit closers.io to hop on a call with one of our team and discover how we were able to go from 0 to 30 million in less than 3 years. And until then, keep climbing, and we will see you on the next one.